He betrayed his wife with her best friend, thinking no one would find out. But when they least expected it, she turned her own pain into the perfect plan to reveal the truth in front of everyone. On the night she decided her marriage had become a cheap stage play, Sophia Reynolds wore a red dress that seemed stitched from the very flames of her contained rage. The birthday party for Michael, her husband, unfolded with the choreographed perfection he so adored. The beach house in Miami Beach, a luxurious retreat with the sound of waves crashing in the background, was filled with smiles, champagne flutes, and the fine mist of social hypocrisy. Golden lights, strung between palm trees, reflected on the guests' faces, but for Sophia, they only illuminated the cracks in the facade of her life. From a discreet corner near the immense window overlooking the dark ocean, she watched Michael laugh. It wasn't just any laugh. It was that loose, uninhibited one he used to reserve only for her in the early years, when their love hadn't yet been eroded by familiarity and boredom. Now that laugh was for Jessica, her best friend, who stood beside him, touching his arm with an intimacy that stung the eyes. Everyone there saw a long-standing friendship, a natural complicity among three people who shared life. But only she, Sophia, saw what it really was. The rehearsed script of a betrayal about to have its premiere and its grand finale that very night. If you understand the weight of being betrayed by those you trusted most, give it a like and subscribe. That way, we keep these stories alive, to remind you that no one is alone. On the buffet table, among the silver trays and tropical flower arrangements, rested a discreet black envelope, almost invisible to the inattentive. On it, in elegant calligraphy, two names, for Michael and Jessica. It was an invitation to the end of their world. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand the surgical precision of that night, we need to go back 6 months when the first fissure appeared, as thin as a hair but strong enough to eventually topple an empire. 6 months earlier, the Miami sun still warmed Sophia's skin with the promise of happy days. Life was a mosaic of well-managed achievements. A solid career as a tax attorney, a stable marriage to Michael, a charismatic entrepreneur in the event planning industry, and a friendship with Jessica that seemed the emotional anchor of her adult life. They met in law school, but while Sophia pursued the rigidity of codes and procedures, Jessica veered into the fluidity of interior design, a profession that, as she put it, added color to people's gray lives. Their friendship was the kind everyone admired. They were inseparable. Dinners, weekend getaways, confidants for secrets ranging from professional insecurities to everyday banalities. Michael, from the start, seemed to fit perfectly into this trio. He always praised Jessica, highlighting her lightness and her fun way of seeing the world, a counterpoint, he said, to Sophia's calculated seriousness. "You two complete each other," he used to say, smiling. And Sophia agreed, blinded by the trust she placed in the two people she loved most. Betrayal, she would learn later, isn't an event, but a process. It grows in the subtext, in the small gestures that trust prevents you from seeing. It started with subtle details, almost imperceptible. Calls from Jessica at odd hours, not to Sophia, but to Michael, with the excuse of asking for an opinion on an event vendor or a new lighting trend. Michael in turn began mentioning details about Jessica's life that he shouldn't know, things she'd only share with an intimate friend. "Jessica's thinking about painting her apartment sage green. Can you believe it?" he commented once during dinner. Sophia frowned. Jessica hadn't mentioned anything to her. "She told you that?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Oh yeah, she mentioned it the other day. I think we were talking about event decor," he replied, already changing the subject too quickly. The seed of doubt, once planted, has stubborn roots. Sophia began to observe, not with the paranoia of a jealous wife, but with the cold analytical eye of an attorney building a case. She noticed the glances that lingered a second longer than necessary during dinners, noticed how they laughed at inside jokes she didn't understand, noticed the silence that fell when she entered a room where the two were talking. Each of those moments was like a small drop of poison, harmless alone, but lethal when accumulated. Miami's intense social life, with its events, yacht parties, and meetups in South Beach bars, became the perfect stage for this slow erosion. They were an admired trio in the circles they frequented, the image of modern, successful friendship. No one suspected. Sophia herself fought against her instincts, accusing herself of being tired, stressed, imagining things. How could she suspect Jessica, the maid of honor at her wedding, the woman who held her hand when her mother got sick? How could she doubt Michael, the man with whom she'd built a life, with whom she planned a future? Denial was a warm, comfortable blanket, and she clung to it with all her strength. Until reality, cold and cutting, tore that blanket to shreds. It was on a Saturday afternoon during a casual lunch in their backyard. Mrs. Eleanor, the elderly neighbor who'd lived next door for over 30 years and saw Sophia as a daughter, was watering her orchids. She watched the three for a moment, Michael and Jessica laughing at something on his phone, Sophia a bit apart with a forced smile. Later, when Sophia brought her a piece of cake, the old woman held her hand with her wrinkled fingers and said, with the wisdom of someone who'd seen many stories repeat, "Some friendships start by lighting us up, my dear, but be careful. Some end up burning everything around them." In that moment, Sophia just smiled, a sad and empty smile. She didn't yet fully understand the depth of that warning, but she felt a shiver, a premonition that the smoke she was starting to sense wasn't just an impression. The fire had already begun. Mrs. Eleanor's prophecy hung over Sophia like a dense fog in the weeks that followed. The neighbor's words, "end up burning everything around them," echoed in her mind during long work meetings, sleepless nights, and especially in the moments when the silence between her and Michael became louder than any argument. The doubt, once an uncomfortable seed, now germinated in her chest, a tangle of poisonous roots that suffocated her peace. She became an observer in her own life, a detective disguised as a wife, searching for evidence that, deep down, she prayed not to find. Every notification on Michael's phone that made him smile discreetly, every time he said, "I'm just running a quick errand on a Saturday afternoon," every casual mention of Jessica's name in trivial conversation, everything was catalogued in her mind as another piece of a puzzle she feared assembling. The lightness that once defined her home had been replaced by a palpable tension, a static electricity crackling in the air, ready to spark a storm at the slightest friction. Michael seemed not to notice, or perhaps he was too talented an actor, maintaining the facade of normalcy with disconcerting skill. He continued to be the attentive husband on the surface, asking about her day, planning the weekend, but his eyes, once mirrors of her soul, now seemed like closed windows with the curtains drawn. Her friendship with Jessica became a minefield. The coffee meetups, once a sacred ritual of complicity, now were sessions of silent torture. Sophia analyzed every word, every gesture from her friend. The way Jessica averted her gaze when talking about Michael, the way her responses about her own weekends became vague and generic. "Oh, I didn't do much. Just handled some things, you know how it is," she'd say with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sophia, the attorney trained to detect the slightest hesitation in a witness, saw all the inconsistencies, all the calculated pauses. She felt the lie in the air, thick and suffocating like the humidity in Miami before a storm. The pain of suspicion was a double-edged knife. On one side, the agony of imagining the betrayal. On the other, the paralyzing guilt of doubting the two people she trusted most. She felt disloyal for suspecting, but foolish for not doing so. This duality consumed her, turning her into a colder, more distant version of herself. She stopped sharing her insecurities, her dreams. How could she open up to the woman she suspected of sleeping with her husband? How could she seek comfort from the man she suspected was the source of her pain? Isolation became her only companion, a cold cocoon where distrust slowly metamorphosed into a somber certainty. The breaking point, the moment when denial shattered for good, came on a rainy Tuesday, 2 months before the fateful birthday party. Sophia had a business trip scheduled to Washington, D.C., an important hearing that would demand her attention for 2 days. She said goodbye to Michael in the morning with a perfunctory kiss, his mouth feeling like a stranger's. He wished her luck, said he'd miss her, and the words sounded hollow, a memorized script. On the way to the airport, as the car snaked through the chaotic city traffic, She mentally reviewed the documents for the hearing. That's when a chill ran down her spine. The folder. The blue leather folder containing the essential legal opinions for the case wasn't in her briefcase. She'd left it on the desk in her home office in her rush to leave. "Carlos, please turn back," she said to the driver, her voice tense. "I forgot something crucial." Carlos, a discreet and observant man who'd worked for the family for years, maneuvered the car without questions. As they headed back, an inexplicable sense of dread began to overtake Sophia. It wasn't just about the folder. It was a gut feeling, a visceral intuition that something was terribly wrong. Arriving on her quiet street, Sophia's heart pounded against her ribs. Parked in front of her garage, like irrefutable proof of her worst fears, was Jessica's white Mini Cooper. The car was unmistakable, a symbol of the cool and modern personality Michael so admired. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. Michael should be at his office downtown. Jessica should be visiting clients or at her own studio. There was no logical reason for that car to be there. For an instant, she thought about calling, confronting, making a scene, but the attorney inside her, the cold and calculating strategist, took control. She asked Carlos to stop the car at the corner, out of sight of the house. "Wait here, please, I won't be long," she said, her voice an icy whisper. She got out and walked under the light drizzle, the house key in her trembling hand. She opened the front door with infinite care, turning the knob without a single noise. The house was silent, but it was a charged silence, vibrant. And then she heard it. Laughter. Coming from upstairs, from their bedroom. It wasn't loud laughter, but muffled, intimate. The sound of two people sharing a secret in a space that should be sacred. Sophia froze in the middle of the living room. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to go up the stairs, to burst through the bedroom door and catch them in the act. She wanted the confrontation, the explosion, the catharsis of rage. But something stopped her. A supernatural coldness took over her body, freezing the fire of fury and turning it into ice. She didn't need to see. The sound was enough. The presence of the car was enough. Her gaze swept the living room and landed on the coffee table. There, like a still life of betrayal, were two wine glasses, one with the mark of a red lipstick she knew well, and beside it, casually tossed, the Murano bead necklace Jessica wore almost every day. That necklace was her friend's visual signature, a gift Michael had brought her from a trip to Venice. A friend's gift, he'd said at the time. In that instant, Sophia understood that some screams are so loud, they don't need sound. The pain that hit her was physical, a sharp stab in the chest that stole her breath. But there were no tears. Tears belonged to the woman she was until 5 minutes ago. The woman now in her place didn't cry. She planned. Without making a single noise, she retreated, closed the door with the same delicacy she'd opened it, and returned to the car, where Carlos waited, his face a mask of professionalism, but his eyes full of silent understanding. On the way to the airport, a new Sophia was born. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it was now contained, channeled, transformed into a cold and potent fuel. She didn't cancel the trip. On the contrary, the distance would give her the time and clarity she needed. Before boarding, she turned to Carlos, the driver who was more a silent confidant than a mere employee. "Carlos," she said, her voice firm, without any trace of emotion. "I need a favor. A very discreet favor." She explained what she suspected, without beating around the bush, without self-pity. She didn't want his pity. She wanted his loyalty. She asked him to observe Michael's and Jessica's movements in the coming days, to note places, times, anything that seemed out of the ordinary. Carlos, who held deep respect for Sophia, simply nodded. "Consider it done, Mrs. Sophia." During the 2 days in D.C., she was impeccable. She won the hearing with brilliant argumentation and a coldness that impressed even the opposing attorneys. No one could imagine that behind that facade of unshakable competence, her personal world was in ruins. When she returned to Miami a week later, Carlos was waiting at arrivals. He said nothing until they were in the car. Then he handed her a small envelope. "Every Thursday afternoon, Mrs. Sophia," he said in a low voice. "He leaves the office early and meets her." Always at the same inn in Key Biscayne, Seaside Inn. Inside the envelope were dates, times, and even the license plate number of Michael's car entering the parking lot. The confirmation was brutal, unequivocal. Sophia didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just looked at the papers, feeling the weight of concrete truth in her hands. Arriving home, she went to her office, turned on the computer, and ignoring the pile of work waiting for her, opened a new folder on the desktop. With steady fingers, she typed the name of the project that would change the course of her life and seal the fate of her husband and best friend. The name glowed on the screen, a promise of poetic justice. Project Key Largo, October 12th. The revenge had begun to be sketched. The digital folder titled Project Key Largo, October 12th, became the epicenter of Sophia's new existence. There, in that virtual and impersonal space, she began to build, with the same methodology she'd used to prepare a complex case, the scaffold where Michael's and Jessica's reputations would be publicly exposed. The pain of betrayal, an open and throbbing wound, was methodically transformed into an action plan. The tears that didn't come, the rage that didn't explode, everything was channeled into a frightening clarity of thought. She didn't want an impulsive revenge, a passionate confrontation in a hotel room. That would be easy, predictable, and above all, unworthy of her. What she desired was something far more sophisticated, a controlled implosion, a spectacle where the guilty themselves would be the protagonists of their own ruin, under the attentive eyes of all who once admired their false perfection. The attorney in her knew that the most effective justice isn't the one that shouts, but the one that presents irrefutable evidence, leaving the defendant defenseless, exposed under the cold light of truth. And the betrayed woman craved that exposure, not out of sadism, but out of a visceral need to reclaim her own narrative, to show she wasn't the foolish victim they assumed, but the silent director of the entire final act. The following weeks were an exercise in superhuman self-control. Sophia turned her home into a stage, and she was the lead actress. In front of Michael, she played the role of the devoted wife, perhaps a bit more distant, more tired from work, an excuse he accepted without question, probably relieved not to deal with more focused attention. She continued to frequent the same social circles, to smile at dinners and chat with Jessica on the phone, listening to her lies about busy days and stressful projects, while in her mind, every word was another nail in the coffin she was building for that friendship. Living this duplicity was exhausting. There were moments in the middle of the night when she looked at the man sleeping beside her, the same man who'd been in another woman's arms hours earlier, and felt an overwhelming urge to wake him, to confront him with the evidence she was accumulating. But she resisted, breathing deeply, reminding herself of the final goal. Revenge, to be truly satisfying, needed to be served cold, at a banquet carefully prepared for a select audience. The plan began to take shape. The idea for Michael's birthday party came like an epiphany. What better stage than a celebration of the life of the man who betrayed her, funded by her, and attended by all the pillars of his social and professional world? It would be the ultimate irony. She presented the idea to Michael with calculated enthusiasm. "Darling, you're turning 38. It's a special date. I want to organize an unforgettable party for you. Something big at the beach with all our friends, your important clients. You deserve it." Michael, vain as he was, loved the idea. The grandeur of the event blinded him completely to any other possibility. To him, it was just more proof of his success, his status, confirmation that he had a wife who idolized him. He didn't see the trap being set. He saw only the shine of his own ego reflected in her eyes. And as Sophia predicted, the first person he suggested to help with the organization was Jessica. "Jessica could give you a hand with the decor, don't you think? She has impeccable taste." Sophia smiled, a smile that didn't reach her icy eyes. "Of course, my love. Great idea. No one better than her to make this night perfect." From that moment, the planning meetings became the scene of a theater of the absurd. Sophia and Jessica sat together, choosing color palettes, flower types, and menus, while Michael participated occasionally, giving input. For Jessica, those meetings were proof of her impunity. the chance to be near Michael under the most legitimate pretext possible, right under the nose of the deceived wife. She didn't realize that every decision she made, every suggestion she gave, was just another step toward the abyss Sophia was silently digging. Sophia in turn observed the dynamic between the two with forensic detachment. She saw the disguised touches, the complicit glances exchanged over her head, the body language that screamed an intimacy they believed was invisible. Each of those moments fueled her resolve, sharpening the blade of her revenge. While they planned the party's decor, Sophia planned the demolition of their lives. She hired a renowned videography team with the excuse of wanting to capture every moment of the celebration for posterity. Michael again loved the idea of having his grandeur documented. No one questioned the cost, the extravagance. It was just Sophia being Sophia, detail-oriented, perfectionist, always willing to invest in the family image. In parallel, the collection of evidence continued. With Carlos's discreet help, she obtained more than just dates and times. The driver, using his network of contacts and impeccable discretion, got images from the security cameras on the inn street, showing Michael's car arriving, and minutes later, Jessica's. He even got a short footage taken from afar of the two entering the establishment together, laughing. The digital evidence was even easier to obtain. One night, when Michael slept deeply after drinking more than usual, Sophia used his fingerprint to unlock his phone. Her heart pounded wildly, not from fear of being caught, but from the sordidness of the act, the final violation of what intimacy remained. The conversations with Jessica were there, archived under a fake name, but the content was unmistakable. Declarations of love, plans for meetings, veiled criticisms of her, Sophia. Sophia's been so stressed, so distant. "I think she doesn't even notice anymore," one of Michael's messages said. "It's better this way. Less guilt for us," Jessica replied. The coldness of those words hit her but didn't break her. She methodically photographed every screen, every message, every incriminating detail, and saved it all in the Project Key Largo folder. The only person who seemed to sense the seismic shift in Sophia was her younger sister, Olivia. Olivia was the opposite of Sophia, impulsive, transparent, guided by her heart. She saw her sister moving like an automaton, with a calm that was more alarming than any outburst of anger. On the eve of the party, while Sophia finalized the last details at the rented beach house, Olivia cornered her in the kitchen. "Soph, what's going on? You're not okay. This party, it seems like anything but a celebration. It seems like an execution." Sophia stopped arranging the glasses and looked at her sister, her dark eyes inscrutable. For a moment, she thought about confessing everything, about unloading the weight she carried. But the plan was already in its final stage, and any emotional leak could compromise it. She just gave a half smile. "I'm just making sure everything turns out perfect." Olivia wasn't convinced. "You're really going to do this, Soph? Whatever it is you're planning, you're really going through with it?" Sophia picked up a brown envelope, heavy with the material she'd printed and burned onto a USB drive, and sealed it. "I'm not going to do anything, sis," she replied, her voice soft but with a thread of steel. "I'm just going to let the truth present itself. It's the only one with the right to speak." That same afternoon, she met with the lead videographer, a talented and ambitious young man. She handed him the envelope and a clear instruction, along with a generous extra payment. "During my husband's speech, I'll give a signal. Raise my glass like this. At that exact moment, you interrupt the live feed on the screens and play the content from this USB. No questions, no hesitation." The videographer, seeing the cold determination in her eyes and the money in her hand, just nodded. The piece was set. The actors were in place. All that was left was for the curtain to rise. The night of October 12th descended over Miami with an almost cruel beauty. The air was warm and still, laden with the scent of the ocean and the tropical flowers Jessica, in her happy ignorance, had scattered around the beach house. The party was a resounding success, a testament to Michael's power in the event world and Sophia's impeccable organizational skills. Guests mingled on the wooden deck, their conversations and laughter blending with the ambient music, a smooth jazz that created an atmosphere of relaxed elegance. The golden lights, just as Sophia had envisioned, reflected in the champagne flutes and the sparkle of jewelry, painting a picture of happiness and prosperity. Michael was the sun around which all planets orbited. He moved through the room with the confidence of a king in his castle, receiving hugs, handshakes, and compliments. By his side, almost always, was Jessica. She wore a silver dress that shimmered with every movement, a moth drawn to the flame of the man she believed she'd won. They exchanged smiles, glances, small touches that to them were well-guarded secrets, but to Sophia were just the final acts of a farce about to be unmasked. Sophia, in her red dress, was a striking figure of contrast. She didn't mingle, she observed. Positioned in a strategic spot near the bar, she seemed the perfect hostess, smiling at guests, waving, exchanging cordial words. But her eyes were those of a general surveying the battlefield before the final attack. Each smile she gave was a mask, each kind word a distraction. Inside, she was a well of icy calm. The nervousness she expected to feel didn't come. In its place was only an unshakable certainty, a sense of inevitability. She saw the faces of friends, Michael's clients, partners, and thought about how in a few minutes the image they had of that perfect couple, that solid friendship, would be irrevocably destroyed. There was a pang of sadness in that, the loss not just of a husband and a friend, but of an entire social universe built on a lie. But that sadness was quickly supplanted by the need for justice, the urgency to expose the truth that consumed her from within. She caught the videographer's eye across the room. He was positioned near the large screen set up in the garden, ostensibly to show a montage of happy photos of Michael. The young man gave a discreet nod, confirming he was ready. The machinery was primed. The moment arrived around 10 at night. The MC, hired by Michael, stepped onto a small stage and called for everyone's attention. The music lowered, and the guests turned, their faces lit with anticipation. "And now," the man announced with a pompous voice, "I'd like to invite the birthday boy, our dear Michael Reynolds, to give us a few words." Michael stepped onto the stage amid applause. He took the microphone, his face flushed with happiness and alcohol. He looked the picture of success, the charismatic entrepreneur, the beloved husband, everyone's friend. He began his speech with the usual feigned modesty, thanking everyone for coming, sharing one or two funny anecdotes about his journey. Sophia watched, motionless, her untouched wine glass in hand. She felt Olivia's gaze on her, a worried, pleading look. Felt Mrs. Eleanor's gaze, who'd come with a caregiver and sat in an armchair, her small, wise eyes fixed on her, as if she knew exactly what was coming. Then, Michael reached the part of the speech that would seal his fate. He raised his own glass, his smile widening on his face. But none of this would be possible, none of this would be fun without the people who are the foundation of my life. He paused dramatically, scanning the crowd until he found Sophia's. "I want to thank, from the bottom of my heart, the incredible woman who's always been by my side, my partner, my safe harbor, Sophia." The guests clapped. Some whistled. Sophia kept her enigmatic smile. Michael continued. And here came the fatal mistake, the arrogance that would make him stumble. "And I can't forget to thank someone who's made this night and so many others absolutely perfect. A friend like few exist." He turned and looked directly at Jessica, who watched him with barely disguised adoration. "Thank you, Jessica, for your friendship and all your talent." In that instant, as Michael's and Jessica's gazes connected in a moment of public complicity, Sophia knew it was time. Slowly, with the grace of a scorpion delivering its sting, she raised her glass of red wine, the agreed signal. Across the garden, the videographer acted. The montage of smiling photos of Michael playing on the screen was abruptly cut. For a second, the screen went black, causing a murmur of confusion among the guests. Michael, caught mid-sentence, looked at the screen, frowning. And then, the first image appeared, clear and undeniable under the Miami night. It was a photo from the security camera, showing Michael's car entering the Seaside Inn parking lot in Key Biscayne. The date and time were marked in the bottom corner, a Thursday, 2 in the afternoon. A perplexed silence began to spread through the party. Before anyone could fully process, the image changed to another, showing Jessica's white Mini Cooper arriving minutes later. The whispers started, low and uncertain. The next image was the grainy but clear enough footage of the two getting out of their cars and entering the inn's reception together, his arm casually around her waist. The sound at the party died completely. Glasses stopped halfway to mouths, smiles froze on faces. The only sound was the soft music that the DJ, in panic, hadn't yet cut. The screen then began displaying the photos Sophia had taken from Michael's phone. The text messages appeared, enlarged for all to read. "Can't wait to see you Thursday," one from Michael said. "Sophia's been so distant. I think she doesn't even notice anymore." Jessica's reply shone on the screen, cruel and definitive. "It's better this way. Less guilt for us." A collective gasp, a sound of shock and scandal swept through the crowd. Jessica went white as wax, her eyes wide in pure terror, alternating between the screen and Sophia. Michael was paralyzed on stage, the microphone dangling in his hand, his face a mask of disbelief and panic. He tried to speak, but only a choked sound came out. It was Jessica who broke the silence, her voice shrill and desperate. "This is a lie, it's a montage. Sophia, how could you do this?" All eyes turned to Sophia. She remained calm, her posture regal amid the chaos she'd created. She took a step forward, her voice clear and firm without needing a microphone. "A lie, Jessica?" she asked with cutting calm. "Then why not call the inn right now? I'm sure they can confirm the reservation under Michael Reynolds. He always asks for the same room, number 7, with ocean view. Detail-oriented, right?" The precision of the information was like a final blow. Jessica staggered, as if physically struck. Michael finally found his voice, a mix of fury and plea. "Sophia." "Why?" Sophia walked slowly toward the stage, the sea of stunned guests parting for her like the Red Sea. She stopped in front of Michael, completely ignoring Jessica's presence. In her hand, she held the black envelope that had been on the buffet table all night. She extended it to Michael. "Happy birthday, my love," she said, her voice low but audible to all in the sepulchral silence. "You've just given yourself the gift you deserved." Inside the envelope, he'd find the divorce papers, already signed by her, along with a copy of all the financial evidence she'd gathered, detailing the assets to be divided. Without waiting for a response, without looking back, Sophia turned. With the same elegance she'd arrived, she walked through the astonished crowd, past the beach house gate, and disappeared into the dark night, leaving behind the ruins of 2 lives and the deafening sound of truth. Sophia's exit from the party wasn't a flight, but an abdication. She left behind not just an unfaithful husband and a treacherous friend, but an entire world built on the shifting sands of appearance. As she walked down the deserted street, the sound of her own breathing and the distant crash of waves were the only soundtrack. The chaos she'd deliberately instigated at the beach house seemed to belong to another dimension. There was no triumph in her heart, nor the vulgar joy of revenge. What she felt was an immense void, the vacuum left by the demolition of 15 years of her life. It was the calm that follows a hurricane's passage when the sky opens over a landscape of wreckage. She didn't look back, not once. She knew exactly what was happening there. Michael's panic, Jessica's humiliation, the whispers turning into open accusations, the guests dispersing like ants whose nest had been trampled, eager to spread the most scandalous gossip of the year. She could visualize the scene with the clarity of a film director, but she no longer felt part of that movie. She was, finally, just a spectator who'd stood up and left the theater before the end credits. In the 2 months that followed, Miami became a city of ghosts for Sophia. The news of Michael Reynolds' party exploded in social circles with the force of a bomb, reverberating in gossip columns, WhatsApp groups, and coffee chats. The story was told and retold, each version more embellished than the last, but the core truth remained intact: the double betrayal and the cold, spectacular revenge. Michael and Jessica became pariahs. He, the charismatic entrepreneur, saw contracts cancelled and business partners distance themselves, not so much for the infidelity which the corporate world often forgives, but for the public humiliation, the colossal miscalculation that made him seem a fool. The image of power and control he'd so cultivated was shattered. Jessica, in turn, vanished. The high society interior designer, whose career depended on trust and a network of contacts, saw her doors close one by one. No wife would hire her to decorate their home, fearing she'd do more than just pick the curtains. Humiliated and socially exiled, she packed her bags and left Miami, seeking anonymity in some other city where her name wasn't synonymous with betrayal. While their world crumbled, Sophia built a new one. She moved from the luxurious apartment she shared with Michael to a smaller, brighter, airier space in the bohemian South Beach neighborhood. The apartment had a wide balcony with an ocean view, an ocean that was no longer the backdrop of a life of appearances, but a horizon of possibilities. She got rid of most of the furniture and objects accumulated during the marriage, feeling a physical need to shed the weight of the past. The separation process was quick and brutally efficient. With the evidence she had and her peculiar legal competence, she negotiated a settlement that left her financially secure, but more importantly, emotionally free. Michael didn't contest. Defeated and exposed, he just wanted it over as quickly as possible to try to salvage the shards of his professional life. They never spoke directly again, communicating only through their lawyers, two people who'd once promised eternal love and now treated each other with the cold formality of litigation. The biggest change, however, was internal. Sophia, who'd dedicated years of her life to a demanding career at a renowned law firm, felt that world of contracts, numbers, and corporate disputes no longer made sense. The precision she'd used to plan her revenge seemed empty when applied to shareholder disputes. She needed a purpose, beyond cold logic, something that touched the soul. After a period of seclusion and reflection, she made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She quit the firm and offered her services voluntarily to a small NGO that provided legal and psychological support to women in vulnerable situations, many of them victims of domestic violence and abusive relationships. There, listening to stories of pain and resilience, she found a new kind of strength. Her experience, once a weapon for revenge, became a tool for healing. She didn't tell her own story, but her empathy was palpable. The women she helped sensed in her an understanding that went beyond technical knowledge of legal codes. They sensed she understood on a fundamental level what it was to have the ground pulled from under your feet. The final scene of this silent transformation happens on a Sunday morning, 2 months after the party. The Miami sun pours soft light over the South Beach shoreline. Sophia walks along the sand, barefoot, feeling the damp grains under her feet. The red dress from the party night has been replaced by a simple light white dress that dances with the ocean breeze. In her hands, she holds the same black notebook where months earlier she'd noted the dates and times of Michael and Jessica's meetings. She stops near the rocks where fishermen prepare their nets and watches the sea for a long time. The notebook, which had been the diary of her pain and the script of her revenge, now seems an artifact from a past life. She opens it one last time, flips through the pages filled with her precise handwriting, and a small smile, the first genuinely light smile in a long time, touches her lips. It's not a smile of victory, but of acceptance. With a calm gesture, she tears out the pages one by one and releases them to the wind. The pieces of paper fly, dance over the waves for an instant, and then are swallowed by the vast blue of the ocean. She no longer needed those notes. The story was finished, and its weight finally released. As the last piece of paper disappears into the water, the narrator's voice returns, firm, soft, and full of a hard-won morality. Some betrayals don't ask for revenge. They just ask for a stage, and the courage to walk off it at the right time, leaving behind nothing more than silence and the sound of the sea. The camera pulls back slowly, leaving Sophia's solitary and serene figure against the ocean's vastness as a soft melody of piano and violin begins to play, sealing the end of a war and the beginning of a hard-won peace. What did you think of this story? From 0 to 10, what score would you give? Subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get all our stories, and click here to watch another surprising story. Thanks and see you next time.